Next is Mr. Van Kesteren, and then thank you for welcome to come to committee tonight. And it's
well,
great
thank you,
to have
Chair.
here.
Thank you, and thank you all for 4 minutes. Well, I'll try to be quick. I wasn't going to say anything, and I do thank you all for this opportunity. Until I heard Tom's story, and it reminded one of my own too. Mr. Corbett, I don't know if I agree with it. As a matter of fact, I really don't agree. When you suggested that most elections, all elections in Canada, are fair and honest. And I think for the most part that's correct. But you know, I got thinking of this little phrase. I was at eyes not seen or ear heard. What people's imagination will conjure up. And back in 2004, first year I ran, and I was one of these that just narrowly defeated, I think 403 votes or something like that. Green as grass. I'd never run an election before, never been involved in one, and so somewhat dejected and depressed, we went back to the drawing boards and we looked at the polls and dug up and started looking at all these numbers, and we noticed this one particular poll, and doggone it, we were wiped. I mean, wiped out, not close, wiped out, 53-2, 60, whatever it was. It's just somewhat depressing. And so we, obviously the question was, well, what are these polls? Well, they're nursing homes. Now, I ask you, because I know the answer, and I hope you have the same answer. Surprisingly, the next time around, we put people inside those nursing homes, and doggone, I think we won most of those nursing homes. So, you know, I want to go back to what you were saying about prosecution and taking it out. I would think, being just like everybody else, who would be somewhat fearful and somewhat nervous about doing something wrong, if there was repercussions, or if there was something that may result in a little bit more than just, as Mr. Lipinski was talking about, the act that, well, nothing had really happened, I'd be reluctant if I was involved in a scheme like that. So wouldn't you agree that maybe that kind of a change in the Election Act might prevent that sort of fraud from ever happening again?
Change to what again, sorry?
Just well, let's call it hanky-panky. Let's just call it those little irregularities that people have conjured up through the years. And would you know, if you were working inside a polling booth or something, would you think maybe that people might be a little afraid of pulling something like that off?
If there was an offense, you mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's an obvious offense. I mean,
well, you'll have to give me a better definition of the offense here, but I mean, in the polling booth, in the polling station, there are numerous people watching what goes on, including scrutineers from the political parties, are there not?
We didn't have scrutineers at the particular, yeah. Well, okay, we can argue that's my fault. You're right. I probably should have had scrutineers. We didn't have the people. We were new at this game. But isn't it wrong, whether or not there were scrutineers there, isn't it wrong to take, I'm guessing, maybe some old folks that really didn't know what day it was, let alone who they're going to be voting for?
Yes, it is. It's influencing the vote.
Yeah.
I presume there's an offense in the Act amongst those 200 that might fit it already. But I think that's a genuine concern as to how these polls, how voting is conducted at nursing homes.
And would it be possible that if we were better able to identify those things, and if the repercussions would be such that it would be a little bit more than, I'm just trying to,
a little more than a couple of $1,000 fine.
Yeah.
Well, that's what your legislation will do now. It'll make the penalties more severe. I believe there's an offense for that already.
Yeah.
Kesteren, and your story. We'll go now to Mr. Scott for 4 minutes. Apparently, Madam Latz-Andress has given you all her questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Corbett, for being here. One of the pieces of your testimony I thought was extremely important, because frankly I don't think we've heard it before, is your description of the involvement of the Commissioner for Canada Elections staff on E-Day itself, the role in working with the Elections Canada staff,
35
the election
days.
period, the whole
Yeah.
35 days, sorry, and the role in kind of troubleshooting and scouting irregularities. And you asked who will do it now that that symbiotic link with Elections Canada is gone, and I believe you said flat out, well, the DPP won't be doing it.
That's right.
So who will?
As I say, it would have to be picked up presumably by Elections Canada without the assistance of investigators. And I'm not talking about a couple of our investigators. We had everybody there every day for 35 days.
Right.
Full court press on this. And these are matters, as we say, can we deal with them right away?
Right.
To keep things fair. I don't know.
So do you
I don't
think, this is only a semi-rhetorical question, do you think that that unintended result of the move of the office to the DPP is going to enhance our electoral process?
Well, you need a regulator during that 35-day period of time engaged. And the benefit I would submit from investigators, sir, is that they're good at it. They're skilled at it. They're 30-year veterans of police forces in dealing with people, in getting municipal police forces to help out. When an investigator phones and says, I want to talk to you about something, generally speaking, the head of a condominium corporation will listen to them. They're very good at getting things done.
Yeah. I guess it's a sad thing
if
that...
there's someone else can do it, I'd be pleased to hear.
Right. Well, it's a kind of a sad thing when such a major consequence as that would emerge from a completely unnecessary move of an office to another area of the capital due to reasons that seem to amount to not much more than a hate-on for the chief electoral officer. I just want to ask you about another closed investigation. Something called the in and out expense laundering scheme. And are you aware of how the mechanics of that were discovered? Did it have something to do with having access to candidate level or district association level returns?
It had to do with audit work on campaign returns.
Exactly.
Large numbers jumping off the page.
So large numbers jumping off the page, but you did not, or the office in question did not have access to the national level documentation and receipts for any party documentation and receipts.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And so would you say that the lesson from how the Conservative Party's in and out expense laundering scheme was discovered would be that it would be beneficial if we all had access, if the Chief Electoral Officer had access to national level documentation and receipts for national campaigns?
I'm sure the Chief Electoral Officer would agree with you on that point. But it wasn't vital in that particular
Not in that case.
There was so much other information available.
Okay, thank you so much.
Great. We'll go to Mr. O'Toole for 4 minutes to finish this round.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Mr. Corbett, for your time and your experience. It was very interesting. I have a couple of questions based specifically on your comments. I'm going to take you through a couple of them before asking the questions that arose from the comments. You said first it's, in your experience, both from justice and within the Commissioner's office, that it was, in your experience, it's unusual for investigators and prosecutors to be housed together. You also said that relatively small office of the Commissioner, I think you said 20 people, rely heavily on Election Canada resources, so it's sort of a small unit housed within a larger one, totally reliant on the resources. You talked about the legal experts. A question I have from that, the legal experts that you rely on, do they advise both the Commissioner and the Chief Electoral Officer and the administration side?
They could, but in fact, I don't believe they were. We had legal officers working with us pretty much all the time, individual. But the same legal unit, if you will, looked after all the legal matters. And Elections Canada was concerned that whatever legal position Elections Canada took was reflected in our office as well.
You also said one of the reasons you found it unusual for investigators, prosecutors to be together was because of the regulatory nature, the regulatory statute that was at issue, and the goal of the Elections Act is compliance, and the investigation side is less rooted in that goal. Is it fair to say? And it's more looking at the 200 infractions you mentioned after the fact?
No, as I say, if we can get compliance without worrying about the infractions, we're interested in doing that. And that is fostered when witnesses do talk to us and tell us what's gone wrong and what's happened. I mean, that's the first step towards a cooperative and perhaps a compliance agreement and no referral at all. Compliance agreements are dealt with by our office alone.
Yeah.
When people are cooperating and telling you what's happened, that's good faith right off the bat.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm glad to say I'm not personally familiar with the compliance agreement, but you talked a bit about them in your testimony. So in those cases where there's been an investigation, the commissioner themselves with the investigators and the team will determine whether a compliance agreement is appropriate in that situation?
Yes.
Is the chief electoral officer consulted in those decisions?
No.
So, to be clear, the team of the commissioners will be involved in the investigation, decisions about prosecution, and even decisions about settling potential prosecutions. And all of that is housed within Elections Canada.
Not decisions about prosecutions. We do an investigation. Compliance agreement fits best with a minor matter as opposed to, say, voter fraud or other things. Can I give you an example? Overspending on a campaign by a certain number of thousands of dollars. We're not taking that to prosecution.
So that's a good example, because I think we're all familiar with a few cases, even with the current Parliament, of some of those agreements. Mike?
Your question is now run out of time. No. It's very close to 9 o'clock in the evening, and I think we'll let Mr. Corbett go for the evening. And thank you very much. And Mr. Corbett, anytime you want to just meet and have a coffee, I could listen to your stories most of the day. So, yeah. Yeah.
I have to tell you, as I say, I was an outsider, and it was an experience for me and an education on the electoral process to be there.
Well, thank you so much for coming tonight. Members of the committee, we are tomorrow night at 1 Wellington from 7 o'clock through till 10 or later. We will be supplying you something to eat tomorrow night, so you know ahead of time. Yeah, okay. All right, anything else for the good of the committee? Seeing nothing, we are adjourned.